Hello and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with me, Jeanne Sparrow. This is my podcast about finding success in the gift of who you truly are. These are conversations with people who know what that looks and feels like, in the hopes that it's an inspiration for you to find the ways to use your unique gifts in pursuing your passions, making your dreams come true, and engaging with the world in the way that you were created to serve. I do hope this gets deep. I always say it because that's where we find the best stuff for this work. But it is also about the fun of life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's dare to be free, brave, be free, be you together. Now, my guest today is so much fun. She is the sustainability expert, best-selling author, speaker, TV personality. Her work has been featured on the Today Show, Good Morning America, The Washington Post, Vogue, Glamour, many, many more. She's also spoken before the United Nations, has a very popular TED Talk, and has worked as a brand strategist and influencer for some of the world's most ethical and innovative companies, including LUSH, Eileen Fisher, Airbnb, Nissan, and many others. In her past career, she was a political strategist and cabinet-level advisor to some of the country's most high-profile politicians and governmental organizations. She holds degrees from 2 Ivy League universities, Brown and Columbia, and 1 from Oxford. So she's super, super smart, but she's really, really fun at the same time. Her best-selling 2018 book on stylish, sustainable living, Give a Shit, Do Good, Live Better, Save the Planet, is considered the sustainability Bible, and the title in and of itself, to me, exemplifies who she is as a human being. She was one of my favorite guests to have on TV back in the day. I am honored to welcome the one and only Ashlee Piper to the Fearless Authenticity podcast. Hey, girl.
Oh, Jeanne, that was such a beautiful intro. I'm just going to bring you with me everywhere I go.
Girl, I'm a hype man to end all hype men, ma'am.
You are amazing. Well, thank you for that. I'm so happy to be here and just be chatting with you. It feels kind of like old times. We're virtual, but it feels like we're like in the couches. There might be some rescue dogs like coming in later. There's a cooking segment. It feels familiar.
It's the whole hang, honey. I remember back to the, mid-teens when we first met.
Yes.
And you were talking about sustainability at a time when it really felt like it was a big ask, right? That doing any more than, the blue bag recycling or the bin recycling was just too much. And the thing that I always appreciated was your sense of humor about it, your non-judgmental approach, and your commitment to connecting our everyday actions to something larger. And I think you took it into bite-sized pieces. Now, Earth Day is almost upon us. It's one day out of 365, but I think it's a good place for people to start to elevate. So I want to start with that part of the conversation, because to me, I see your sustainability journey and the one you want us to be on as one of small steps that can make a big change, not just in us, which we talk about a lot, but also for the whole world. And I think that feels so large, but it's not for you.
Sure. I mean, well, it does sometimes feel large for me.
Oh, it does? Okay. It never seems that way.
Not the steps unto themselves, but the messaging of it. So you talked about how like we kind of first became acquainted in 2014, like in real life, I think, when I did a segment on You and Me this morning. And you guys were for sure the most receptive of any media outlet I had ever pitched, because I was pitching myself. I thought, wow, I'd love to bring some of this messaging to mainstream television, meet people where they are, make like these strategies, show them how simple it is, or it can be, how it can be economical, all that good stuff. And so y'all were like the first ones. I was pitching national shows and other local Chicago shows, and you were pretty much the first and only ones who not only were receptive from jump, but also were very much like, yeah, we should have more of this. And I found it so enjoyable because you really wanted to present it in a fun way too. So we did some wacky ass stuff, but I always had a great time. And I genuinely think like viewers did too. We made it fun, and we made it like not seem crunchy and weird and uncomfortable. So that always is still a hurdle for me, is like, how can I make the messaging something that's going to be resonant with people, and not make them think those things that are stigmas around sustainability, like it's crunchy, it's expensive, it's socially isolating, it's weird and fringy, it doesn't make a difference. So I'm really appreciative that you said that. I, have a kind of an approachable way about it, because that is one of the biggest things I want to help people reconnect with, is their personal power, on like how powerful they are, how powerful our personal choices and habits are, and how easy it is to simply shift a few of those and actually make a big difference in what is a very large, very scary, very real problem that kind of requires all hands on deck.
There's a lot in there, and I've been saying this a lot lately with guests. Okay, we got to unpack some of this.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
Because the first thing that comes to my mind, especially when it comes to the actions that we take, is the connection you make between personal power and these small choices. You said in one, I want to say it was in your TED Talk, but I've seen you say this before, how sustainability and sustainability practices are like building hope, that there's this connection between sustainability and self-care, which is something that's super important to me. And I see it also as a gateway to success, because without that self-care, we can't get anywhere in a sustainable way, right? And so it's and I'm starting to understand from my friends who are in the sustainability world, a lot of you guys that are in it, especially now, and I think especially you, see it not just as this lifestyle choice, but as a way of life. So can you talk about that piece of it, like where the power and the hope is in it, how that's related to self-care and success for you?
Sure. So I can kind of just tell a little snippet about my personal journey into sustainability, and then how that's really shaped my belief around it, sustainable practices being kind of a part of self-care, very good for us. So I was a political strategist and was doing a lot of messaging work for a variety of national politicians and clients, and government organizations and things like that. And I became personally interested in veganism, vegetarianism, animal rescue, and those were kind of my gateway drugs into sustainability, because it's all interconnected. Now we're hearing about like terms like intersectional environmentalism and things like that. You really can't have sustainability existing in a vacuum, because it touches on everything from social justice and human rights and inequities and all this stuff. So I was like eaten up with it. I was so into it on a personal level, and I found it kind of strange that here I am working with pretty high profile politicians who either want to get reelected or are interested in getting elected, and very few of them, if any, had sustainability as part of their platform. And if they did, it was on a more kind of macro policy level, obviously, because they're politicians or government agencies. So it's very much like, okay, well, we're going to enact like this kind of policy, or, I'm going to have this department for the environment, or cap these kinds of emissions. And those are all really, really important. We obviously need those. It's a complementary thing. We need like big industrial and political governmental regulation on emissions and pollution, all that stuff. But we also need individuals kind of doing their part too, because it does matter. And so for me, I found that journey into more sustainable habits. One, I didn't find really a lot of guidance out there that was in a way that resonated with me. Like I found a lot of people who are doing incredibly ambitious and interesting things in the world of like personal sustainability. They were like making their own clothes and, milling their own flour and doing all these composting at home, like stuff that I thought was really cool, but it wasn't necessarily like feasible for my lifestyle. And then on the flip side, there were all sorts of books out there that existed around climate change, or, like reports and stuff, but they were incredibly cerebral. They were like really dense, kind of doom and gloom. If you're not like studying for a PhD in climate science or something, you're going to be like either leaving very depressed or very confused, because it's just like, and you would really get entrenched in this stuff. And I just thought, after doing this personally for a while and kind of trying different habits, like a choose your own adventure book, really wanted to start to talk about sustainability and the offshoots of it, like minimalism and green beauty and vegan, fashion and, all those kind of things that sort of are intertwined in more mainstream media in a way that folks could like digest the content because they're a captive audience. They're right there watching their morning show, or they're reading that online magazine, or they're reading that fashion magazine, and just give them, like, do the legwork for them and make it easy so that they're not sitting there going, crap, how do I find a cruelty-free lipstick? Or how do I, and I come from a pretty conservative family. Some folks don't believe in climate change. There are a lot of people out there. A lot of people believe different things. And I just found that this kind of like fun, warm, doing the work for people and making it simple, because we're all really busy and we all have decision fatigue and we have a limited amount of time. Making it simple for people and making it attractive is, and making it meet them where they are was what I wanted to do. So that's, for me, I found that very, very almost like a form of self-care. So much so that I quit my career in political strategy to kind of pursue this and navigate this full time when there wasn't really like a path to do it. Now, I've had other jobs at the same time, because it was, like, unless you're, an anchor, like a host, like employed, you don't get paid to do TV segments or anything. But I just really loved doing it, and I felt like it was valuable. As far as individual actions that are sustainable and self-care, we have data on this that's really compelling. We know that about almost 70% of people experience something they call climate anxiety. So much so that even like therapists are starting to report that people are engaging with them with the sole reason being that they feel anxious about what's going to happen to the planet with climate change. And we know that this impacts people from the ages of about 17 to 24 most intensely. Obviously, right? Like,
because they're worried about whether or not the planet's going to be there for them and it's going to look like a zombie landscape.
Exactly. Is this going to be like the Last of Us kind of stuff here or whatever? Right. So I think, the antidote to any anxiety is some kind of forward motion, even if it's small. In fact, most therapists or clinicians would say, if you have just generalized anxiety, do the next right thing, whatever that might be for you. That could be something like drinking water or making your bed. If those feel, if like you feel like you can't even, move during the day or whatever. So I think actually like sustainable shifts are a really good antidote to climate anxiety, because even if you don't believe that bringing your bag to the grocery store makes a bit of difference, doing that one thing can create kind of some energy and some momentum that makes you see how easy it can be. And also makes you feel like, well, maybe this could be doing something good, so maybe I could do another good thing. And then you feel like you're part of the solution. So for me, I think that's really powerful. And in addition to that, I also talk a lot about how we are so much more influential than we think we are. And especially so with like in the age of social media. I sound like I'm 90. I'm like, the age of social media. But we are. And so we have influence at 3 degrees outside of our direct sphere of influence. And even more so if we talk about someone like you as a platform, you have a lot broader sphere of influence. So without even preaching to people, our actions, folks will observe us the same way like children observe adults doing something. They'll observe us, and some people will have a natural curiosity about habits. And that's how we saw, like, for instance, the no straw thing take off, because that was really just kind of rolled up from people starting to do it and people seeing it. And I think that's really interesting, because a lot of times, especially when we hear about climate change or anything going on in the world, we can feel really apathetic. We can say, shoot, I'm just one person. I don't matter. My boss doesn't even look at me during the day. Like, I don't matter. But the fact of the matter is that you do. And we have a lot of tangible examples of how individual actions roll up to collective movements that make a huge difference. And I wanted people to feel reconnected to that.
So important. And especially what you say about influence, because it's peer pressure in a really good way, because it does exist. And I'm thinking about when Ginger Z, who I remember when she was working here in Chicago, but she was inspired by your book to not buy any clothes. I can't remember how long she did it, but she talked about it on the air, like, I'm not buying anything new. And part of her job is looking a certain way on television. And I think that, and because I remember seeing it, go on, Ginger. And then I was like, wait, she got this from Ashlee. I love
Yeah, Ginger's so sweet. She's so cool. She did a no new clothes challenge, I think inspired just by stuff in the ether. So she rents or gets her clothes secondhand. And then she did in November, December, and January of this year, she did my no new things challenge. So it just expanded from clothes to anything else she would buy aside from like food and like necessary repairs. So she didn't buy like new furniture, new supplies, new makeup, new like any of that stuff, which I think is incredible because she did it over the holidays too. So she ended up, we talked about it, she ended up giving her kids like experience gifts. And people on her social channels were like, "Oh my God, what about the children?" And she was like, "My kids are fine. they're freaking fine. We're doing cool things. It's fine." So yeah, it was amazing that she was open to doing that and like really excited to do it too.
And it gives you some inspiration about, even if you can't do it to the level that she was able to do it, it goes, okay, how do I start with this? And it goes, oh, wait, you know what? What's a thing that's a pain in the butt? Going to the store to buy clothes or going online and going, and then I got to return it and I got to do this. What if we don't actually buy anything new? How do we reuse these things? How do we find other items? And I think it is about pushing these boundaries of what we've done before. Now, here's my question, because there are a lot of other things embedded in what you talked about that I think are interesting journeys to success, because I'll start with this. Is what you're doing now what you feel like you were meant to do? It's all these different layers of things: author, TV personality, and writer, and all of those. Has this been a process of discovery of the things you really love? Is there some kind of through line between them all?
It's been sort of a Frankenstein of a journey, like kind of just going, well, okay, I'll freelance and write for this. And okay, I guess I could try TV. Like, it's been really throwing things against the wall, so to speak, that I'd never done before. And kind of going with that and seeing if it works. And, I'll be totally transparent. I'm not yet in a place with this where I'd like to be. And I don't, think anybody necessarily is. I'm not in a place financially where I'd like to be with this work. I'm not in a place kind of exposure or reach wise where I'd like to be. But I look at, where I was like 10 years ago, and, you kind of have to look at the growth. But I do feel really strongly that sustainability is a place and a purpose for me, and that I want to continue to grow in that. Would it be great to grow in that into the TV space? Hell yes, that would be wonderful. Am I writing a second book? Yes. But there are also elements of maybe I'll go back into politics. I feel like I'm kind of right now testing what are the areas of need, because now with the just extreme proliferation of YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and we know that people get a ton of their news and kind of like ideas from creators there. That's not where I'm at. I'm not like an Instagram influencer, so to speak. There's a whole younger generation that's kind of coming up doing that around sustainability. And so I don't know if TV is going to continue to be a good horizon for this or not, but I'm kind of just like, I'm sure it's probably similar to you. You've had like so much success and done so many things. I mean, you're similar to you as in like, I'm not at your level. Okay, so hold up. But you're like an icon. And then where do you go from there? Like, what do you do with kind of like the next chapter after you and me, or where do you do after these? And then you just kind of re-engineer it and see what feels right. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes 100% sense. And I did not realize this is where this conversation was going to go, but let's go there. Because that piece, that feeling that so many of us have, that we aren't where we want to be, right? That we still have someplace else to go. It is always funny, especially at this point in my life. I just turned 53 a few months ago.
Shut up.
And yeah, girl, it's crazy.
I mean, it's like I'm looking, you look young as hell.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
53 look good. You're making it look good.
I'm trying, girl. I'm trying. I'm trying to feel good at 53. That's really what it's about at this point. But here's the thing, even at this age, even with the things that other people may see as success, and there are a lot of young people in my business who will call me an icon or a legend. And I'm like, Thank you.
Mhm.
It's hard to process that when you're like, okay, yeah, I did that. I'm on to the next thing. And I love the word re-engineering because I do think that some of the things I do look crazy from the outside in. But people then look at the one slice of it and go, oh my gosh, this is really amazing that you did that. I feel like we have that in common.
Mhm.
And I find it interesting that we also have in common that perspective of we're still not where we want to be, because from the outside in, people are like, that's great that you got that done, that the book, and you do this, and you've talked to the United Nations and this, and you've got these degrees. And you're like, yeah, but I'm not where I want to be. So
Right.
let's talk about that path, because you too have left lucrative careers without a net. You've moved across country. You've set up in places that you haven't had a history. How have you made those decisions that may look like crazy on an ordinary day on the outside to other people? What is that process of remaining true to yourself and following those ideas and passions, and maybe even bucking the expectations and encouragement of people who really do love you and want the best for you? And you're like, yeah, no. What
Mhm.
does that look like for you?
Um, I think I do a lot of things based upon gut feel. I mean, I'm not like so impulsive that I'm like, I'm gonna move to Toledo and do this like tomorrow or whatever. But I do have, sometimes I'll get an idea and I'll say, that could be like, that could be interesting. And I play with it and I kind of think about it. I think when I left political strategy, I had like zero idea of what I was going to do. I thought I was going to maybe go lobby or, be like a lobbyist for, either an animal rights or some kind of environmental organization. And when I explored that, I was like, oh, I can't like support myself on that. That was like one of those things. So I sort of lived and still sometimes live in this space of I'll have a different career that's my keep the lights on job, which makes it sound like lame, but I'll have like a whole other career, but I still nurture this on the side because I can't give it up. I can't get rid of it. It's like, it's just constantly something I feel like I want to do and I have ideas around. Um and sometimes it causes me quite a bit of stress actually, because you see so many people, especially with social media, again, not to vilify it, but so many people looking like they've just freaking made it. They're young, they're slim, they're rich, they're just the exposure and the recognition for seemingly like not that much hustle or work seems to just be, endless and instant. And you feel, and then as you get older too, because I'm like almost 42, you're like, am I aging out of being relevant in doing these things? Like that, sometimes I feel that way about sustainability on TV. I was like one of the first people to deign to do it, but am I suddenly like aged out of that? And so I wrestle with that mindset sometimes, and I really try to wrangle it to, of course, I'm not where I want to be with this. And of course, I've had many chapters or seasons of my life, and I will continue to, because we're never kind of done, right? Like we're never fully fleshed out, developed people until we're, back absorbed into the universe or whatever happens to us. So I have also done a lot around cultivating the social media I do consume to be very much around people who you don't normally see, really hustling, really making it, like especially, and I think it's especially important for like older women to like be seen and to be celebrated like that, because we do have like a youth obsessed culture, and I think social media makes that even more so. So I really like, I get a lot of inspiration from seeing, a 90-year-old running a marathon or whatever. Like I like people who look at their lives and they don't say, I'm this age, I'm hitting the rocking chair, or, I can't do this kind of stuff anymore. So I get a lot of inspiration from that. And I just don't feel that afraid to try things. I think that is like a muscle that I felt afraid to leave a 10-year career where I made a very good living. That was frightening for me. And then I did it and I was like, I mean, it wasn't we still alive over here, so it wasn't so bad. Was it emotional? Yeah. Like there was some adjustment for sure. But once you do that, you're like, I mean, I can, once you move cross country, once you have to like go out and make friends in a completely alien place, I guess, like, I think the self-reliance just builds and builds. And so really there's not much I think I can't do. It's just a matter of determining with limited amount of time and energy, what do I want to do? Because I am really focused on joy as well. And sometimes you kind of need to reconnect with that and figure out what that is. I mean, I'd be interested in your take on this too, because I feel like you are an expert of not reinvention necessarily, but re-engineering, I guess. Like, you're still very much yourself, but you're out here doing a lot of different things.
Girl, I got a short attention span. I don't have a damn choice. I really don't. And it's funny because people see it, people have called it reinvention, especially when reinvention was like one of those keywords that people use. I mean, literally somebody told me I was reinventing myself like when I was in my 30s. And I was just like, I thank you. You meant that as a compliment. Like, it's all the same to me. That's the problem, is that for me, I just see things like, if everybody's looking here, I'm literally looking like this. Like, I just see things differently. Like, I tend to look for the essence in everything. Right. And that's really what this podcast is about. I have some very strong beliefs and opinions and experience about certain things. And I really believe that fearless authenticity, this idea that who you are is where you find your success, is like the simplest. Like, I believe in boiling everything down to the simplest thing. I've talked since I was 9 months old. Like, I literally don't know anything else. I run my mouth. I had the worst conduct grades. I went to Catholic school when I was little. Like, I was, and this was during a time like in the 70s when they were experimenting with all this stuff, and you had S's and U's. You didn't have grades, but they gave grades for conduct. I had all these S's and all these stars and shit. And then at the bottom for my conduct grades, it's like dashes and this and mother called. And why? Because I was, so if that's the way I'm supposed to connect with things, that I'm going to do everything I can in that way. And that's the conversation I want to have here about what does that look like for other people? Because I might believe this essence to be true in my own life, right? But what does it look like for other people? So that will lead me to my next question for you is, when I say these words, fearless authenticity, what comes to mind for you in terms of a definition in your own life, connections between the way you express yourself in your work or personal life and how you define and achieve success, whatever that looks like for you? Because one of the things I think that comes up for you a lot is the word fearless. Being comfortable with this unknown, like just in this conversation, but that is true from your TED Talk to all the interviews I've seen with you. It's about taking that step just beyond the place where we're comfortable.
Sure. Wow. I mean, it's almost like you're an amazing host or something, because these questions, my friend. Okay. So how I feel, if I was giving a layman's definition of fearless authenticity, to me, that strikes me as having the courage to be true to yourself and true to your values, and also the courage to change and to evolve. I think that's something that I noticed a lot in politics. We hear it a ton about, like, oh, someone who's like a 40-year politician or something, which that's a whole other conversation, but they've changed their stance on X over time. And I think, well, I mean, I freaking hope so. Like, there are some things that I'm like, well, shoot. And there are some people who suck and like just flip flop because they think it's popular, but they don't actually believe that. But just like that, we are allowed to change. And I think it takes like courage to do that, right? Like, it's kind of like evolve or die, and I feel a lot like I am so much different than I was when I was 18. Thank God, and I'm different than I was when I was 35. And I also think like we're told a lot of what we should want and we should do, especially women or women identifying folks. We're told, hey, here's your trajectory. Yeah, you can go to college. Yeah, you can get a job. But like, it's a really important thing for you to find someone, get married, settle down, move to the suburbs, have children, like do that whole thing. that is wonderful if that is what you want to do, but that is not for everyone. Just like home ownership isn't for everyone, just like freaking driving or snowboarding or anything isn't for everyone, but yet it is so much a prescription. And I think that maybe also when I got to a point where I was like in my 30s and all my friends were pairing off, and I was like, I mean, I have relationships and stuff and I like that, but I'm not chomping at the bit to do these things. And I'm also not ruling those things out for my future, but I just think it's really interesting that if you go through that, which I know you have as well, you kind of come out the other end of feeling that friction of like, is something wrong with me that this isn't my main priority right now? And then you're like, oh, I know this is just I'm following like my intuition. I'm doing what I feel like I should be doing, and it's not necessarily what everybody told me I should be doing. Does that make sense? Like,
100% makes sense. And you know what? I the older I get, the more experience I have on this planet. We'll call it that.
I love it.
I realize that I think there are more of us that don't engage in a conversation with what expectations are or what we think expectations are, because I think sometimes we internalize things that actually are not true of what those expectations are. And we live out according to that and it's kind of like being on autopilot. I should be doing this, therefore I'm going to do that. And then you wake up one day and go, how the hell did I get here? Because you haven't been having a conversation along the way. And I feel like if we started having that conversation earlier, that we would have a lot more people who are satisfied in their relationships, in their lives, in their work, and our whole world would be a better place because we would all be feeling like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Right. Because you're doing it like the supposed to is what feels right to you, as opposed to what you've been kind of told are your limited cache of options. That's really, I mean, damn, it's profound. It would be almost, I mean, and I do wonder if that was like how people's lives would be different if they felt like they could not just had permission, but had the agency that they don't need to have permission from anyone else to do these things. And I think especially women feel like we have to ask permission to be in spaces, to do certain things. And I hope that that's going away. Not just women, obviously, like basically anybody who's not
all humans. I think all humans have some of that. And I think some gender identifications do have more of it than others, because we, just like you can pass along, biological traits, you pass along trauma, and you pass along expectations. And I think another thing, especially for us as Americans, and this is why this is something I talk about a lot. We already talked about self-care, which is huge for me, because I think a lot of times our self-care is not real. Like it's not the things that actually care for us and sustain us and use. And that's why I love that climate change talk has turned to sustainability as well, because the core of that word, I think, is what a human yearning actually always is. But one thing I think as Americans that we don't talk enough about is failure. And falling flat on our faces and getting up and doing it again. Even though we talk about it, we always talk about it in terms of winning and the zero-sum game. But as entrepreneurs and as somebody who is trying to build something that hasn't been done, I really want to talk to you about this, because I am sure you have had to iterate over and over and over again as things shift and change. And as entrepreneurs, like when I started my own business, I realized, and people kept telling me this, fail forward. And you read about it and all these things. And so the question I have for you is, what do you think so far has been the most significant failure, setback, challenge, however you call it or look at it? And what did you learn from it? And did it help you to put a system into place for the next time it happened? Because you kind of already touched on that when you talked about, leaving that first big job. But to me, that's a decision as opposed to something that you didn't plan to happen. So how do you deal with those little failures that can be so disheartening when you're trying to build something?
Sure. I'm not trying to think what the biggest failure would feel like to me. I'm not sure. I think
Okay.
there have been failures that were contingent on other people kind of approving me or giving me an opportunity. And no matter how hard I worked and how hopeful I was, they didn't happen. Like that, it could be like a talent agency or something was like, we're no, or it, even when I went out to do my first book, the first time that I first of all had to like learn about the process, find a literary agent, all of these things that you see people on like social media. And it looks like they just like wake up one morning and frickin' book deal right there. And you're like, what the hell, man? So back in like 2016, it kind of started the process and thought, well, I'll try to find an agent, because I don't really personally want to self-publish. And finding an agent, I had no idea how to do that. So I just like cold emailed a bunch of agencies and people. And I did find an agent, and she's great. She's still my literary agent. She's amazing. And she happened to find my email / abbreviated book proposal in a colleague of hers no pile. She found it in the no pile, and she thought it was actually kind of one of the most interesting pseudo proposals she'd ever received, because I didn't know how to write a book proposal and I didn't know how to reach out to these people. But she found it and reached out to me and said, I think this is kind of interesting. I don't know what this is that you submitted to us, but I was curious and I like sustainability. And then we got talking, and the rest was history. So we wrote the main proposal. Well, I did, and she edited it. And I'm just saying this, you're already going through this process, I'm sure, because you are writing a book, which is very exciting. And we went out to bid for the book back in 2016. 2016? Yeah, we went out to bid, and I was really excited. I told everybody, I was like, because I'd had a lot of calls with publishers, like big publishers who seemed very interested. And it's like dating a little bit. I was so amped. And I remember going to work that day. I told all my colleagues, I told the person I was dating, I just like hyped it. And then noon comes around and nobody made a bid on the book. And I was like, oh, does this mean like, are we extending the time? Like, does this mean nobody? And it turned out like the one publisher who was the one editor was really interested. She wanted to bid on it, but she was leaving. She got another job, not in publishing. So I felt I just felt shit. I'm saying? I was like, oh, wow. Like here, I really was kind of trying to ride that wave of manifestation. Like I believe this will happen, and I put in the work and everything. And then it just completely didn't. And I actually took about, I would say 6 months off. My agent was like, well, we can try again. And I said, you know what? No. And I didn't do any sustainability work for that 6 months. I felt like this was the indicator to me that this was not something I should be doing anymore. And I'm thankful that I didn't keep doing that.
What got you back?
Stay in that space. Well, not to get terribly political, but when Trump was elected, so this was like summer of 2015. When Trump was elected, my agent reached back out to me and said, I think it's time, like when, certain things, we were like leaving the Paris climate agreement once he took office and stuff. She said, I think it's a good time to tweak this and reinvigorate the pitch, like go back out with it. And she was right, put a little bit more work into it. And the zeitgeist was totally different. Like the appetite for it was so freaking different than it was just 6 months prior, that I had lots of publishers actually get in a bidding war over it. And I know that this story kind of feels like a failure to success, which is what we were kind of trying to get away from. But the failure, like chasm for me, felt very real. It made me completely, rethink, should I be doing like any of this? And I was tired, I've been doing this for like over a decade. So I was like, when am I going to get what feels like a break, or breakthrough? And you always hear like, oh, people keep going, and the breakthrough happens right before they give up. And I don't know if that's true, but in that instance, I kind of had to have somebody else like motivate me. And then we went out and it ended up working. And I felt like a little validated from that. But I think actually like that, I have micro ones of those all the time. All the freaking time. I feel like a failure or like I'm failing a good amount of the time. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't talk about, is that everybody wants to, like you said, like look successful and like, oh, I'm doing it and all that stuff. But how many of us every day feel like a raging freaking success? And like I don't know, maybe I'm different. but I think ambitious people struggle with feeling like they're falling short a lot. And it's like reframing like failure as experience, and that experience is still valuable and good. And that's hard to do because we are so obsessed with success and looking successful.
And those are two different things.
Yes.
Being successful
Yeah.
and looking for success, because you can look successful on a day-to-day basis and still be feeling failures. And I think a lot of times showing the failure doesn't actually help anybody else. It's showing how you get through it, right? Or,
Right.
talking about it on some level and then having that story. So then I guess my follow-up to that would be, what did you learn that you need to have from that moment to get through the micro versions of that every day? And perhaps, God forbid, some big, chasm opening moment, because they happen. Thank God they don't happen too often. But it sounds like there were some really important elements that you had around you, like the work you had already put into it,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody who believed in it and helped you to refocus that work. But maybe there were other things that you didn't mention. What did you learn from that moment? What do you take from that you think carries you through the micro versions of that, the smaller instances of people not believing in you, or the timing not working out?
Well, there are two things. One, I mean, and it's still like a learning process, obviously. I want to be liked, everybody wants to be liked and wanted and, all that stuff. And it's understanding that like, just like not everybody is for me, I'm not going to be for everybody. And that's a freaking fact, it doesn't matter how bananas great you are. Like there's always going to be somebody who's like, pass, not my jam. So accepting that is the reality for every being on this planet is comforting in a way, right? And it helps me to feel like to not take it so personally. And then I also found through just a lot of things in my life, and maybe this has been the case with you as well, I really am the best version of myself, like the version of myself that I really freaking like when I'm rebuilding, like when I'm on my come up, and it's like you're doing the hard work, you're doing the hard emotional work, you're doing like hey, I'm cleaning bathrooms at a yoga studio so I can make this work, which I did when I first started doing this because I left a job, I didn't have a net. And so I'm the absolute best, most hopeful, most full of creativity. I'm like that tired, raw, like just ginned up version of myself when I am rebuilding to a place I want to be. It's fun to ride the high when you're, good things have happened and you feel like the fruits of your labor are finally being recognized. But I found that uncomfortable spot of like building back is personally one of my sweet spots. I like myself a lot during that. And so being able to embrace that time period helps it to like not suck. It helps you to almost like see a failure, a perceived failure, a perceived setback, and go, well, this seemed like an opportunity to start rebuilding, build Joe Biden sunglasses, build back better or whatever. I just had surgery. It kind of laid me up for a while. And I was joking, like, well, I'm just going to build back better as I'm going through recovery. I'll just be like, be the healthiest like version of myself ever. So I like that. That energizes me. And I think that helps me to move through not getting what I want in a way with grace and kind of some grit too.
I would usually ask at this moment, when do you feel like you're at your best, truest, most authentic expression of yourself? Is that what you just explained?
Yeah, I think so. I think unfortunately I'm like my best self under duress a little bit, or when I'm like freaking hungry for something, like I want it. I'm going to put the work into it. I'm not afraid of the work that it might take. And that work might be not active. That might be like emotional work, or it might be resting, or it might be recovery. Like it might be that, but I like creating a plan for myself and knowing that in 6 months, I'm going to be better. Maybe I won't get to where I ultimately want to be, but I'll be better than where I am now. So yeah, I think that's me at my best self, but I also like me getting what I want too. I like me in a lot of versions, there's almost no me that I don't like. The me that I don't personally like, well, you probably like yourself all the time. You're so confident seeming, but the me I don't personally like the most is when I'm bored or feeling like I don't have a direction. So like you were saying, you can't keep focused on one thing for too long. Like I gotta have something I'm working toward. Like I admire these people who are good at chilling out. They don't really have goals, and that's not to say they're like crap people or anything like that. They're just not up into that stuff, I admire that. I can't do that. Like just for my own well-being, I'm like, I don't know what that's like at all. It's just not my, it's not my thing. So that's like, I'll kind of not spiral, but I'll be like, getting the jitters. Like, what's my next?
Oh, I spiral.
What's my next thing? Yeah, you spiral.
Oh, I spiral.
What does that look like for you? How do you spiral?
sis, it's like it's like the couch opens up a black hole that my butt fits in exactly well, and I'm feeling bad about myself and everybody. No, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for
DoorDash all the time. The house is messy. You're just, we haven't worn real clothes in a while. Basically, like most of the like early part of the pandemic for a lot of people. Just like,
girl,
what do we do?
And finding that peace again is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Well, since I can't end with my usual question, I will end with this one. What do you still dream of doing or creating in this world, or creating for the world, since your work impacts the globe quite literally?
Oh, wow. I still very much dream of having a TV show that is based around like, that's fun, that's showing people how to live in an eco-friendly kind of way, sort of like a Home Edit meets Queer Eye meets like a sustainable spin. I still think that's like, I like the idea of entertainment and education intersecting in a way, because there's so much trash out there on TV. That's actually what I really liked about you and me too, is you guys had such a good balance of like fun things, but substantive things too. And you could blend those really seamlessly in one show, and it didn't feel like weird. It felt like, yeah, people are like this. We're kind of dual, like we have a lot of duality. So we can be kooky and, do this thing, and we can also be like serious and focus on something that really matters. So I really would love to do that. And I also think I have been really thinking seriously about running for political office at some point. And potentially even going back to my home state of Texas and trying to do that, because I feel like people who care about climate change there might be helpful to have there, but we'll see. These are just, those are, I think more than anything, my goals in life are not to be rich. They are not to be, to have like flashy stuff. I never like those things about like become a millionaire and stuff. That doesn't really strike a chord for me. I just want to like live a good life surrounded by good people doing my contributions as much as I can. So whatever that looks like and however that evolves, that will be really satisfying for me. And there will probably be a lot of rescue animals involved in that. Maybe some adopted older children. I don't know. But like, that's kind of that'll be good for me. I feel fine with all that. And if the TV show thing were to happen, I'd be like rock and roll. That's super sick. And I love that.
Well, I hope you get absolutely everything that you want in this world, Ashlee. I have truly enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, right back at you.
And deepening our friendship, because I haven't seen you in a while.
No.
And you used to be a regular part of my life. And it's so good to have you back, like in a way that that I think, we don't ever have time to do this on regular television. So be careful what you wish for. But
I want to, after this, we're making plans to get together in real life too. So I'm very grateful that you initiated this, and I feel very honored to be on this podcast.
I am so grateful for this conversation. The theme of it for me was all about the connection of everything. Sustainability, not just as a movement for the environment, but as self-care, community care. And I love that humor is infused in all of it, even in the face of struggle and uncertainty and insurmountable odds. Ashlee is living in that laughter with everything. I love how she talked about how little things can make a big difference. Something as simple as bringing a grocery bag to the store can actually make a difference. And the more important thing of that is how one little choice creates this energy and this momentum to keep doing more when you connect it to what it's doing for you or for the world at large, whatever it is you care about. And when I think about that in the big picture in our own lives, that's how change happens, whether it's something we're trying to change with ourselves or in the world at large. Connected to that, I also admire that Ashlee is not afraid to try new things, even when it's frightening. That's another muscle that we have to work out. That's how she put it. And I think it's so important because this knowledge that you carry with you, once you've done it that one time or two times or three times, you already know what it's like to try something new, to face something you're not sure of, and you know that you'll come through the other side. I talk about that a lot too, and it's been a theme this season as well. So maybe there's a message for me or you or all of us to dig deeper into that, knowing that what we've done before always applies to what we're trying to do next. It's never really starting all over again because we've been someplace similar before, even if we can't see that similarity. And just like that, she also knows her strength is in the comeback. Now, all of us don't like to try the comebacks, but being able to embrace failure and recognizing it as a sign to rebuild, that the time is here. Because I think that's when we get stuck, when we don't know when it's time to rebuild, when we keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, beating our head against the wall to make something work out, when that's really not the point. The point is to shift. And then finally, her definition of fearless authenticity is where I want to end my thoughts on our conversation, because one of the things I talk a lot about in my trainings, my teaching, when I'm speaking about fearless authenticity is that your truest authentic self today may not be your truest authentic self later or who you were in the past, but it doesn't make any of that any less real. So remember this and how Ashlee defined fearless authenticity. She said, it's having the courage to be true to yourself and true to your values, and also the courage to change and evolve. Man, thank you, Ashlee, for sharing your passion, some really good laughs, and being so honest with us. You are an inspiration. Be sure to check out Ashlee's book, her newsletter, and her website, ashleepiper.com. I also appreciate you, my Fearless Authenticity listeners, for your attention and your support. I would not do this without you. And y'all know I couldn't do it without my team. Thank you so much to my production team for the hard work you do every week on the podcast. Please like, rate, download, share, review, subscribe, do all the things wherever you get your podcast, including on YouTube, and also join my community there. You can find me at Ms. Jeanne Sparrow. You can also use that handle on Facebook and TikTok. I'm available on Twitter and Instagram at JM Sparrow. Wherever you find me, please leave your comments, your suggestions, your questions, your thoughts. I'd love to hear them all. Thank you so much for joining me for Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. We'll see you again soon.